Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Russians are trying to counterattack in the Kursk region, and propagandists and Russian shills are trying to claim huge victories. However, there are certain indicators that are telling me that maybe everything is not as great as they try to paint it. We're going to talk about this and other situations around Ukraine and talk about the debates that just happened between Harris and Trump and how it relates to Ukraine. I'm still traveling. The setup that I have here is, let's just say, flimsy. It would be a kind word, but at least I'm able to put up this square where you can see my face. So let's begin. And we start off right away talking about the situation in the Kursk region. If you remember, Ukrainians have taken quite a significant chunk of the Russian territory. They were able to entrench themselves, and they were able to put a significant number of Russian troops in a significant number of Russian square kilometer territory in a very difficult situation, where on the north of those positions were the river. On the east and the west were Ukrainian forces that completely locked in Russians into this closed pocket, so to say. And Russians for a longer time were trying to resist Ukrainian further advances, and Ukrainians were mostly focusing on striking the Russians and weakening them and drawing their resources away, trying to essentially get Russians to either leave or withdraw and essentially capture this territory with little to no casualties, so to say. The answer that Russian could give, and I explained this in some of the videos ago, is either they try to reinforce this area and try to bring more forces into the area, or they try to deblock it like they do now, or they would want to retreat from the area altogether. So what happened is number one and number two. It has been known that despite Ukrainians efficiently taking out pontoon bridges that Russians were setting up in the area, there were a certain number of armor accumulated in the area, and Russians were able to supplement additional weaponry with the quickly set up pontoon bridges. It was not a lot, but it was a noticeable amount to help for some kind of a push or some kind of activity. And they coordinated this push with the Russians finally accumulating enough resource in the area. If you remember, we talked about this as well, that the current situation in the area is that the advantage is right now about 3-1 Russians to Ukrainians. So for every one Ukrainian that is located on this Russian captured territory, there is 3 Russians that have been sent in to the area. And the only reason that they were not attacking beforehand is that they had really big trouble coordinating all of these forces, trying to make sure that they work as a cohesive units, because a lot of the forces in this area were just not brigades, but like smaller battalions, groups, units, and some of the conscripts as well, that were just grabbed from all of the places across the front line and from the reserves of Russia. But finally, they were able to get their shit together, so to say, and they are now trying to counterattack. A direction that they've chosen for counterattack is towards Korenevo and Snagost, which is this area right over here. And here, the plan is very, very simple. They want to get the guys that are located in this closed pocket to deblocate them and either get them out or reinforce the positions and maybe squeeze Ukrainians out. On the 9th to 11th of the September, which was 3 days ago, Russians claimed big victories. They instantly started posting pictures of how their big armored columns both entered the town of Snagost, which is located right over here, that they moved from the north. And additionally, there were also videos and messages that confirmed that Russians additionally tried attacking from this pocket that Russians were holding. So it turned out to be this combined attack towards Ukrainian positions in attempts to dislodge Ukrainians. The victories that Russians were singing were relatively short-lived, because while the messages about Russians claiming big victories and destroying Ukrainians and capturing Ukrainians in this area continuously are still being produced, the videos completely died down. And on the other hand, Ukrainians have been stating that, to be honest, we were actually expecting that there's going to be counterattack of Russians. So you should take everything that the Russians are stating with a grain of salt. Ukrainians are still operating with full informational security, the operational security. They're not releasing any videos or statements so far. But what we are seeing and hearing is that sometimes Russian channels are claiming that Ukrainians are attacking in areas that would undercut some of these directions of the Russian attacks. So long story short, Russians claim that they've advanced heavily into Ukrainian controlled territory, to which Ukrainians said, nah, actually, things are happening. And remember, we did bring in some of our elite units, the 47th Brigade, the K2 battalion were brought into the area. I mean, elements of the brigade of 47, and other units that are well-known, almost elite type of units. I talked about this in the last video. So Russians here potentially walked into traps, but I'm not going to claim anything. Just want to underscore that the situation is dynamic. Ukrainians are definitely fighting. There are certain pushbacks from the Russians from their initial columns of armored vehicles attacks, but overall the situation is still not decided fully. Then let's move on to Pokrovsk direction, because this is where the Russians are attacking on their main line of advances. And here the situation around Ukrainsk has been worsening. I was expecting that Ukrainians would try to set the defensive lines along the river right over here, but it doesn't seem that they were able to stop. Some of the Ukrainians are claiming that the unfortunate thing that we see around Ukrainsk, around this area, is that Russians are able to move around relatively freely. So there are certain capabilities of stopping the Russians missing at all places in the area. So all in all, what they would describe here is they're stating that while it was possible to slow down Russians moving towards Pokrovsk, and not completely stop, but I want to underscore that slow down. I still believe that Ukrainians are still trying to buy time for Russians to reach Pokrovsk rather than fully committing to stopping them. But they were able to slow down Russians advancing to Pokrovsk. However, there are still notable weak points around other parts of the front line, for example, towards the south, where Russians can exploit less formidable defenses of the Ukrainian armed forces. I am still expecting that this pocket that Ukrainians ended up in is going to be pulled out of. So I actually am expecting that this pocket will be closed quite soon. And overall, we will see Russians then move their efforts either towards Pokrovsk or towards the south, where the critical point that we're looking at here in the south is Kurakhove. This is also a major logistics and supply hub of Ukrainians in the area, and it's crucial for Ukrainians to hold it if they want to stay very competitive in this area and deter Russians. So far, again, I would take it very calmly. It is expected that Russians will take certain territory. I believe that's the plan of Syrsky. And obviously there are, in pro-Ukrainian community, the panic spreaders, for whom it's always everything is bad, everything is terrible. I still believe that Syrsky knows what he's doing. The fact that Russians are counterattacking at Kursk, and right before Russians started counterattacking in Kursk, we've seen like some of the elements of the elite units being transferred to the area, like they were expecting it. So the people that are in Ukrainian general staff know what they're doing, and they're operating with the resources that they know they have. And Russians are still having the total advantage in resources. So I'm trusting in Ukrainian armed forces, and I'm sure that overall plan is there and we're moving along it. Let's talk about the other news about Ukraine. One of the interesting operations that was conducted just recently was the night raid over the sea in the Black Sea by the Ukrainian intelligence services. And they were able, with the view of the night cameras, to strike down the Russian Su-30 plane over the night, which was a very interesting operation. I will show a couple of clips. Unfortunately, the music here is playing, and I'm not sure if it's copyrighted or not. But it was great. It's a great operation, got on camera, and we'll see potentially more of these intelligent operations to strike critical targets of Russia. There is a big discussion right now that the pressure is accumulating on Biden for the allowing Ukrainians to strike the targets on the Russian territory. Bloomberg is claiming that it's unlikely before UN General Assembly. I don't know why UN is still being treated seriously. But what I want to underscore here is that all signs show that the pressure is very firmly accumulating on Biden. And I think that maybe he can hold it through until November. And then once the election are over, we could see the allowed ability to strike against Russian territory after November elections in US. And then there is the topic of the Harris and Trump debate. Debate went wild, and overall I'm not going to cover the full debate. I'm just going to talk about the points about Ukraine. But in general, debate perceptions are something like this.
Embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Yeah, absolutely wild stuff. So debate went not too much into the Trump's favor, at least that's the general perspectives. But they did talk a little bit about Ukraine, and Trump was actually pressed, surprisingly, on the question whether or not he wants Ukraine to win. And I think it was great because it showed exactly underscored everything that we knew about the Trump's plan for Ukraine, that he just wants to negotiate. He wants to pressure Ukraine into giving the territory to Putin to have some kind of negotiated quote-unquote solution. Basically, giving Putin what he wants, and therefore, because Putin has nukes, that Trump was very, very clearly stating that he is scared shitless of Putin's nukes. And yeah, because of the Putin's nukes, he just wants to appease Putin and give everything that Ukraine has. And so on. If you are even considering like who to vote for, I critiqued Joe Biden and Joe Biden's policy on Ukraine and stating that it's really, really bad, that Joe Biden can and should do more for Ukraine. But I want us to understand that Harris, while not proposing anything new, and it seems that she's going to be continuing Joe Biden's plan, right now it's an option between like not so good for what is Joe Biden offering, and there is plenty of room to critique what he's doing and how he should do better, and Trump that just want to sell out Ukraine. If Ukraine is important for you and you want this to be something that defines your vote, you must vote blue. Because Trump and his only option that he wants to present is to sell off Ukraine and wants to appease Putin and make buddies with him. He will sell off Europe, he will sell off Ukraine. He is the enemy of democracy. And if we want to talk a little bit about substance, about how stupid his plan is, because in his world, it's absolutely, it's so stupid. I'm sorry. It's every time it hurts my brain talking about the plan that he proposed. He's going to call Zelensky and say, hey, Zelensky, you need to stop a war with Putin, or otherwise we're going to cut supply of weapons to you and you will lose this war. And then on the other hand, he will call Putin and say, hey, Putin, you need to stop the war in Ukraine right now. We will give you territory and just take it, or otherwise we will send as much weapons to Ukraine as possible. And now we have these two scenarios playing. And if you don't think more about them, they sound relatively reasonable. However, when you start actually thinking and filling in the gaps between them, then you understand that it's idiotic, because you have a two-path opportunity which is mutually exclusive. Because if, for example, Putin doesn't agree and then Trump sends weapons to Ukraine, well, then Ukraine just got what it wanted, right? Ukraine just got more weapons to fight the Russians. Which, I mean, okay, it's a victory for Ukraine. Or then if, for example, Trump says, okay, Zelensky says he will not talk with Putin, he will not cede any territory, and then Trump says, well, then no weapons for Ukraine, well, then Putin has no point of accepting the deal. Or even coming to negotiating table, because now Ukraine doesn't have a supply of weapons from the United States. So US has lost all the leverage. So there is no reason for him to come to negotiating table. These two plans like what he's proposing, like these two paths are mutually exclusive. And they are disintegrating each other if you start thinking about this. It's an idiotic plan. It has no idea in reality. There is no way it's going to work in like 24 hours. This man has no plan. This man has no concepts of the plan either for foreign policy. In any case, thank you so much for watching this video. I love you. Trust in Ukrainian armed forces, and Slava Ukraini.